Lilly and Jack Sullivan were the internet's favorite parents, smiling, wholesome, and raising two picture-perfect children in a sunlit suburban dream. But behind every perfectly framed video and cheerful family update lay a horrifying secret. The children weren't theirs, and the life they shared with millions was built on lies, manipulation, and abduction. Lilly and Jack Sullivan were the kind of couple that seemed to exist only in storybooks. They lived in a quiet, picturesque neighborhood in Westridge, Oregon, where the lawns were perfectly trimmed and everyone knew each other's names. Their house sat on the corner lot, painted a soft cream color with navy blue shutters and a rose garden in front that Lilly tended every morning. Jack, tall and neatly groomed, drove a silver SUV to his job as an insurance broker. He waved at every neighbor he passed, always with a smile. Lilly, delicate and poised, stayed at home with their two children, Ezra and Mila. They were the center of the Sullivan world. Ezra, at 9 years old, was a calm and intelligent boy, often seen reading in the front yard or helping his mother carry groceries. Mila, only 6, was bubbly and energetic, skipping down the sidewalk in her pink overalls, and always with a ribbon in her hair. Together, the family gave off a glow of perfection. Every holiday was celebrated with themed decorations. Every birthday came with a video montage of smiling faces, heartfelt captions, and inspirational music, posted online under their growing social media brand, The Sullivan Way. The Sullivans had a popular YouTube channel with over 500,000 subscribers. It started small. Lilly uploaded short videos of parenting hacks and Jack joined in for family vlogs. The audience grew quickly, drawn in by their charm, their kindness, and the way they always seemed so deeply in love. Strangers from around the country left comments praising them, saying how they wished they had parents like Lilly and Jack. They were invited to podcasts, family expos, even featured in a magazine as America's Sweetest Family. But what people saw online was only a polished version of reality. No one knew what was really happening behind the cameras when the lights were turned off and the house was quiet. No one noticed how the children seemed unusually obedient. They never interrupted, never threw tantrums, never looked away from the camera. They smiled on cue. They followed every instruction. And whenever someone asked too many questions about where the kids had come from or why there were no baby pictures, the topic was quickly changed. Lilly would explain that Ezra and Mila were miracles, adopted after years of failed fertility treatments. She told viewers she didn't like to discuss their biological families out of respect. Jack would nod and add that the important thing was how much they loved them. The viewers believed every word. Their neighbors adored them too. They often invited people over for barbecues and movie nights. Lilly hosted yoga classes in her backyard, while Jack helped fix roofs and car engines for those who needed a hand. When one of the older neighbors fell ill, they organized a fundraiser. They brought casseroles to grieving families. They were, in every visible way, the perfect neighbors, the perfect parents, the perfect couple. It wasn't until a local charity event that the first cracks appeared. A social worker named Clea Medwin noticed something odd. She had seen Ezra before. His face was familiar, not from the Sullivan videos, but from a flyer years ago. A missing child flyer from Arizona. She couldn't remember the name, but the eyes haunted her. She didn't say anything right away. Instead, she started watching the Sullivans' videos more carefully. What began as suspicion turned into something darker. The children's smiles looked rehearsed. Their bedrooms shone. During a house tour video, looked too neat, too impersonal. There were no school projects on the walls, no scribbled drawings, just picture frames of posed photos and carefully arranged toys that never looked touched. Clea wasn't the only one who noticed. An anonymous online forum discussing internet. Families began to raise concerns. Threads were opened, screenshots were shared, patterns were seen. Still, nothing was done. Most people dismissed it as jealousy or overthinking. The Sullivans continued smiling, posting, and growing their brand. But behind their eyes, behind the smiles, behind the lens, there was something terribly wrong. It would take only one brave voice to uncover the truth. The world still believed in the illusion, but that illusion was about to shatter. Detective Rowan Greaves had been working financial crimes for over a decade. He had seen elaborate scams, clever identity thefts, and even multi-million-dollar charity fraud. But when a routine tip came in about a small-town family possibly misusing donations, he nearly dismissed it. The complaint wasn't specific. An anonymous caller claimed that the Sullivans, Jack and Lilly, were taking money from old people and laundering it through charities that don't exist. It sounded vague and personal, maybe even a prank. Still, something about the tone of the caller's voice stuck with him. Calm, certain, not angry, just factual. Rowan started looking into the Sullivans' charitable activity, expecting to find nothing more than minor tax irregularities. He quickly realized how wrong he was. The couple had created a public-facing charitable arm called Hearts Over Homes, supposedly focused on helping underprivileged families with housing supplies and emergency needs. It had a professional-looking website, a donation portal, and pages, filled with feel-good photos of smiling children and thank-you messages from supposed recipients. But when Rowan checked the nonprofit's registration, he found that it had only been officially filed 2 years ago. That alone wasn't suspicious. Many small nonprofits started modestly, but the real red flag came from the donation records. Several large contributions, ranging from $5,000 to $20,000, were listed under the names of elderly donors in the Westridge and surrounding areas. Rowan randomly chose 3 and paid them a visit. What he found was chilling. 2 of the individuals had passed away before the donation dates. The third, an 89-year-old woman named Ruth Tilling, had no memory of donating any money and insisted she didn't even own a computer. Her signature on the form had clearly been forged. Digging deeper, Rowan discovered a web of transactions routed through fake organizations: the Velotra Foundation, the Yarnex Relief Trust, and Beacon Bloom Services. Each one appeared to be a nonprofit on paper, with phony directors and vague missions like community health or rural development. All of them had bank accounts that led back to Jack Sullivan under variations of his name: J. R. Sullivan, Jack R. Sullivan, and R. J. Sullivan. The pattern was clear. Fake charities were created to collect donations, and then the money was siphoned back to the couple under disguised expenses. Lily's personal PayPal history also showed luxury purchases: designer handbags, expensive skincare, and imported furniture. One delivery to the Sullivan house included a grand piano worth nearly $30,000, all labeled under the accounting code Equipment for Community Workshops. Rowan began to suspect that their entire image, even their online family brand, was built on exploiting sympathy for profit. But the case escalated when Rowan requested background checks and adoption paperwork for Ezra and Mila. There was nothing. No adoption filings, no court orders, not even any hospital birth certificates under their current names. What little paperwork the Sullivans had submitted was riddled with inconsistencies, wrong dates, mismatched social security numbers, and fabricated medical histories. Rowan brought in a forensic document analyst, who confirmed that multiple pages had been forged using image editing software and printed with manipulated fonts to appear official. Now, Rowan wasn't just looking at fraud. He was looking at the possibility of child abduction. He submitted the children's photos to the National Missing Persons Database. Within days, there were 2 hits. Ezra's real identity was Orrin Bell, abducted from a foster home in Phoenix, Arizona, 4 years earlier. Mila was Ziva Clay, a child taken from a church daycare in Bangor, Maine, around the same time. Both had been reported missing under mysterious circumstances. Both cases had gone cold. No one had suspected they were taken across state lines and rebranded into a picture-perfect family. The implications were enormous. Not only were the Sullivans using children to raise money and manipulate audiences, but they were also hiding crimes far worse than financial fraud. Rowan prepared a full report and submitted it to the federal authorities. He also requested a court order for a full search of the Sullivan residence. Something in his gut told him that these two children weren't the only ones caught in the Dior couple's trap. The investigation had begun with forged checks, but it was heading towards something far more sinister. The mask of perfection was slipping, and what lay beneath was darker than anyone could have imagined. The realization that Ezra and Mila were actually Orrin Bell and Ziva Clay sent shockwaves through the local authorities. These were not just adopted children living under fake names. They were missing kids, stolen from entirely different corners of the country, raised under false identities, and displayed for the world as trophies of a perfect family life. Detective Rowan Greaves felt the weight of something far bigger than a fraud case. If Jack and Lily Sullivan had taken these children, how had they done it without leaving behind a single trace for 4 years? The case files on Orrin and Ziva were revisited. Orrin had vanished from a group foster home after school one day. The cameras near the bus stop where he was last seen had malfunctioned that afternoon due to a power surge. There were no witnesses, no leads. Ziva had disappeared during nap time from a small daycare center run by a church. Her mother had gone to pick her up, only to find her gone, with no sign of forced entry or struggle. A woman fitting Lily Sullivan's description had been seen near the daycare days earlier, but at the time, no one connected the dots. No one even knew who she was. Now, those disappearances made horrifying sense. The Sullivans hadn't stumbled into fame. They had orchestrated it, step by step, using stolen children as the foundation for their brand. Investigators began examining every frame of every video the couple had ever posted. In early content, Ezra and Mila seemed uneasy, stiff, and unusually quiet. They were compliant, too compliant, showing signs of coached behavior. Even more disturbing were the occasional inconsistencies in the timeline. Birthdays celebrated out of sync with the children's supposed ages, memories described by Lily that didn't align with the documented dates of their supposed adoption. There were moments when the children looked off camera as if waiting for silent instructions. In one video, Ziva flinched when Jack raised his arm to wave. The flinch was subtle, just a flicker, but undeniable. In another clip, Orrin's smile faded the moment the camera stopped rolling. Those small details were invisible to an ordinary viewer, but under a forensic behavioral analysis, they stood out like warning lights. The children's medical records were also faked. While their official documents listed routine checkups and pediatric visits, none of the named clinics had ever treated them. It was a paper trail designed to withstand shallow scrutiny, but not the intense cross-referencing that was now underway. It became clear that the Sullivans had isolated the children completely. Neither Orrin nor Ziva had attended public school. They were allegedly homeschooled, but no curriculum was filed, and no testing records existed. They had no contact with other children, no trips to parks, no friends, no birthday parties outside their staged family videos. The more investigators uncovered, the more horrifying the pattern became. This was not just a couple trying to live a fantasy. This was control. Total control. Rowan began to suspect that if the Sullivans had managed to abduct 2 children with such precision, there might be more. He ordered facial recognition scans of all children shown in older footage, some of whom appeared only briefly and were never introduced by name. A few could be identified as visiting cousins or children from other families, but 2 appeared multiple times and then suddenly disappeared from all content without explanation. Their identities were unknown. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the Sullivan house's interior from video footage. One detail stood out: the number of locks on the children's bedroom doors. In some shots, 3 different latches could be seen, one even mounted high, well beyond a child's reach. This raised even more questions. What were they being locked in for? Or worse, locked out of? Social workers were brought in to examine the children in person. Despite their clean clothes and polite manners, both displayed deep signs of trauma, difficulty, making eye contact, hypersensitivity to sounds, and dissociation during interviews. Ziva was found to have bruises on her legs, which were brushed off by Lilly in earlier videos as falling while dancing. But doctors determined the injuries were inconsistent with normal child play. The illusion was crumbling fast. The picture-perfect family that millions had admired was starting to look more like a prison, and the Sullivans weren't guardians. They were captors. With enough evidence now in place, the court issued a search warrant for the entire Sullivan property. It was time to stop watching the videos. It was time to step inside the real house. The morning the warrant was executed, the quiet Westridge neighborhood awoke to flashing lights and unmarked vehicles. Officers, social workers, and federal agents surrounded the Sullivan house with precision. To neighbors, it was surreal. This was the same couple who hosted summer picnics and handed out homemade cookies during Christmas. But now, their perfect cream-colored house had become the center of a deeply disturbing investigation. Jack was arrested in the driveway as he attempted to leave for work. He didn't resist, but asked calmly if he could call his lawyer. Lilly was inside the house with the children. When officers entered, she appeared composed at first, but grew frantic when social workers approached Ezra and Mila. She tried to hold onto them, telling agents that they were traumatized and shouldn't be handled roughly. But the moment she realized what was happening, her composure shattered. She begged, then screamed, then collapsed as the children were taken out of the house and into protective custody. Inside the home, investigators were met with an eerie stillness. Everything looked normal on the surface: spotless counters, coordinated furniture, picture frames filled with smiling faces. But as the search began, the illusion unraveled. Hidden behind a false wall in the basement was a locked room. The entrance had been disguised as part of a built-in shelving unit. Once opened, what lay inside sent a chill through every officer present. The room was small, windowless, and soundproofed. It had 2 beds, child-sized, bolted to the floor. The walls were covered in pastel wallpaper with painted stars, as if someone had tried to make it cheerful. But the presence of a bucket in the corner, worn restraints under the beds, and a single security camera in the ceiling told the real story. This wasn't a playroom. It was a holding cell. Boxes stored in the room contained notebooks, old clothes, and outdated electronics, burner phones, USB drives, and a folder labeled property. Inside were forged documents, including fake birth certificates and school transcripts for Ezra and Mila. There were also identification papers with different names and photographs of other children. Some photos appeared to be screenshots from surveillance footage, showing kids at parks, schools, and daycares. It appeared the Sullivans had been tracking other potential targets. On the second floor, hidden in Lily's closet behind a panel, investigators found a safe containing cash, over $150,000 in tightly packed stacks. Alongside the money were flash drives containing years of video files, many of which had never been uploaded to their channel. These raw recordings showed moments the world had never seen: the children being yelled at, forced to repeat scripted lines, and practicing their smiles. In one clip, Oren sat silently while Jack rehearsed with him how to act grateful for a surprise birthday gift. The boy's eyes were empty, and he never touched the gift after the video ended. Forensic teams collected hair samples, fingerprints, and fibers from every room. They noted the excessive number of locks, child gates, and hidden cameras placed throughout the home, not just for security, but clearly for surveillance and control. In the garage, behind a false panel in the ceiling, they found suitcases packed with clothes, burner phones, and another set of forged IDs for Jack and Lilly under new aliases. It looked like they had been preparing to flee. By the time the search concluded, the evidence of a calculated and prolonged deception was undeniable. The Sullivans had not only kidnapped children, They had built an empire on their captivity. Their videos, their public image, their reputation, it had all been a well-rehearsed lie. The couple had manipulated an entire country, turning their crimes into content and their victims into props. The children were placed in protective care and assigned trauma counselors. Neither spoke for the first 24 hours. They had lived inside a fabricated world for years, and now that it had been torn apart, they didn't know what was real. As authorities reviewed the materials found in the house, they began identifying more patterns, more children, and more potential victims. What began as a social media success story had unraveled into a horrifying web of control, manipulation, and quiet terror. The world had believed in the Sullivans, but now it was time to face the truth. In the days following the raid, media coverage exploded across the country. News anchors called it the greatest case of family fraud in the digital age. The Sullivans had not only deceived their neighborhood and online followers, they had fooled law enforcement, state adoption agencies, financial institutions, and millions of loyal viewers. Every television and mobile screen lit up with images of Jack and Lily Sullivan being escorted into federal court, their heads low, faces pale, surrounded by reporters shouting questions they refused to answer. The trial began 3 months later. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, falsified adoption paperwork, forged signatures, raw video footage, secret recordings, and testimony from psychological experts. The most heartbreaking moment came when child psychologists spoke about Oren and Ziva's mental state. Though they were slowly beginning to adjust under protective custody, both children had been diagnosed with complex PTSD. They had lived years under manipulation, forced routines, and emotional isolation. Their understanding of family had been warped entirely by a scripted life performed for strangers online. The defense tried to argue mental instability, claiming that Lily had delusions of motherhood, while Jack was merely a man following the whims of a troubled wife. But the evidence told a different story, one of equal participation. Jack had engineered the financial side, carefully moving donations through fraudulent nonprofit organizations. Lily had created and maintained the visual brand, the vlogs, the social posts, the cheerful updates. Together, they had built a business model around a lie, sustaining their lifestyle through the exploitation of children who were never theirs. During testimony, digital forensic analysts presented chilling footage found on the Sullivans' flash drives. One video showed Oren sitting in a corner for hours while Jack reviewed scripts in another room. In another clip, Lily coached Ziva to cry on command, then later scolded her for not looking authentic enough. One file titled Emergency Exit Plan contained detailed instructions on how to vanish within 24 hours, complete with a list of states that lacked extradition agreements and maps of border crossings. It became clear that the Sullivans knew the truth might one day catch up to them, and they had prepared for it. The final blow came when another family came forward. A couple in Arkansas claimed their adopted son had briefly appeared in one of the Sullivans' older videos. The timeline matched a short-term care exchange program that the Sullivans had participated in through an unregulated online group. Though the child had been returned safely, the parents revealed that their son had nightmares for months afterward and refused to speak about what had happened. The case exposed a broader, darker reality, that the Sullivans were not alone in this game. Other families online may have been playing with similar deceptions, hidden beneath hashtags of positivity and inspiration. The jury deliberated for just 5 hours. Jack and Lily Sullivan were found guilty on multiple counts: child abduction, identity fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and child endangerment. The judge described their actions as a calculated and grotesque exploitation of innocence for fame and financial gain. They were each sentenced to 85 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. In the aftermath, Oren and Ziva were reunited with surviving relatives who had spent years wondering what had happened to them. Their stories, once buried under a mountain of false smiles and staged moments, were finally brought into the light. They began the slow journey toward healing, guided by professionals and families who promised never to let them disappear again. Across the internet, the Sullivans' accounts were shut down, their videos removed, their followers left stunned, betrayed, and ashamed. For years, people had cheered for them, donated to their causes, and celebrated their miracle family. Now, that miracle had been exposed as a nightmare. The case of Jack and Lilly Sullivan left a scar on the digital age, a reminder of how easy it is to believe what we want to see, and how difficult it is to recognize darkness behind a well-lit screen. It taught the world that not every smile is honest, not every family is real, and not every story deserves applause.